know if y'all have seen, but our queen, Halle Berry, has stepped down. She stepped down from a film role. So she was set to play a trans man in a new film. And she has stepped down. There was a lot of backlash from the LGBTQIA community with regards to her playing that role. There's a guy from another show called Family Guy. I believe the voice actor is Mike Henry. He used to voice the Cleveland Brown. I know someone else has stepped down. Another white actress has stepped down from voicing a black character. So I want to know, do you think that when someone is portraying a character, whether it be in a film, live action remake, voice character, whatever, do you think the actor playing that role should be the same race or the same sexuality as the character that they're playing?
I mean, I think I've got a lot to say about this one, but let me talk about Halle Berry specifically. I think in terms of Halle Berry, it was right for her to step down. I think there are so few trans roles out there. There's so little representation for trans people playing trans roles or playing trans characters that for her, I think it was right to step down. I saw this documentary on Netflix called Disclosure, where it was talking about trans people in TV and film, and it's usually they're getting no representation, poor representation, or prejudiced representation. So I think we're in a time now where, yeah, some people like Halle need to step aside. I respect her. We love Halle Berry, but this wasn't the role for you.
See, I might have an unpopular opinion right now.
Ooh.
Hey girl, share it.
Better tell us.
So, I think when it comes to race, so for example, in the case of Mike Henry, he's been voicing this character that is a black character. He's characterized as a black character. His characteristics are black. So for a white actor to be playing that role, to me, that make no sense, because it's like, you guys have written in this character specifically to be black, so would it not make sense for a black person to play it? However, I can't tell someone's sexual preference necessarily by looking at them. So I do agree with Sophie in the sense that I do feel that, especially for the trans world, they don't get enough representation. But when it comes to other sexual orientations, I can't look at you and assume that. So I don't know if I'm as hard on it as I am with regards to a black person playing a black character, if that makes sense.
Okay, what Luanda, what was that?
It's a long.
You actually act. You actually act. So, like, I'm very curious to hear what you have to say about this.
I think one of the most important things that we need to take note of is that whenever we have these conversations, most of the time we're always talking about a person who in their real life has more systematic power over the character than they're trying to play. Because personally, I would definitely rather be having the conversation of trans actors playing cisgendered roles, or even white passing black people playing Caucasian roles. But the reason why we're not talking about that is because all of the privileges that we benefit from in our lives are ever present in the entertainment industry as well. And the reason why I say something like I'd rather see a trans person play a cis person, or like a white passing black person play a Caucasian character, is because when you have a character that is able-bodied and white and cisgendered and heterosexual, they get to tell their stories. They get to tell stories that have nothing to do with those things. Like, it's very rare to see a trans character that just gets to be a person that doesn't have to have their narrative attached to the fact that they're trans. Same with a black person or a black character. Their narrative is always attached to the fact that they're a black person. And I think that obviously, in an ideal world, any performer would be able to play any role, because in that same ideal world, all people are seen as people. But we don't live in a world where I'm seen as a person that happens to be black. I'm seen as a black person, and my quality of life is affected by that. Trans people don't get to be men and women who just happen to be trans. They're seen as trans people, and they receive like an inhumane level of violence and discrimination because people see them that way. So it's like, as a person that comes from like multiple marginalized communities, it is very common to consume art that doesn't even make reference to your existence.
Yeah.
Like, we have had no choice but to relate and to enjoy movies and shows and books that don't even recognize that we exist. So it's a fresh type of pain to finally see stories that are being told about you, and then you're still being excluded from it. That is really frustrating for me. So I think that we need to look at the power imbalances that happen in our lives and make sure we're not replicating them in TV and film. And I like, you know how I said earlier, okay, like in an ideal world, the most talented actor would play the role, but we can't pretend that all of these other factors don't play a part into the decision making of who that person is going to be. Like, we can't pretend that those things aren't a factor when they are. Like, you can't, there's no sector in your life where you can erase your white privilege, or you can erase your cisgendered privilege, or anything like that. But I will say that I am very grateful to see a shift, because when I was growing up, there wasn't many things that I can relate to, and now there's a lot more. So I'm grateful to be like alive at a time where there's such a shift. And also, on the topic of Halle Berry, I'm actually really grateful with the way that she responded, because she didn't have to respond like that. I mean, she could have been the amount of times that we've called actors out for playing, you know, like when we, like, I don't even want to name names, but the amount of times that we've called actors out for playing roles that are different to their race and stuff, and they're like, I'm bringing nuance to their character, and I blah blah blah. But Halle Berry, she actually took a weekend to be like, okay, let me just watch this disclosure documentary, let me read these comments, let me actually just recognize my privilege in this situation, let me learn and let me grow from it. And that's all that we can ever expect from someone.
The thing is, I think Halle Berry I do believe Halle Berry probably did some work over the weekend, but also I think she probably got a lot of pressure from like her PR team and how big the LGBTQIA plus movement is right now. Now is not the time for her to say, no, I'm just going to play it anyway. So as much as I do think that there was some of that, there is a lot of pressure on like these animation actors who have stepped down. They're not stepping down because they've suddenly had an awakening. Some of them have been playing these roles for years, and now they're starting to get light, and they're like, you know, I've been thinking about this for the past week, and I know I've done it for like 5-10 years, but now I think, like, it's not. There is a lot of pressure on, and I think I really agree with Linda, to be honest, because when I think for Halle Berry, yes, but in general, if we're starting to say people can only play the race, the gender, the sex, the accent, the denomination that they come from, we are going to start getting into like issues, because when we see black actors playing white roles, we laud it. We say, this is amazing. They're breaking barriers. When people are talking about having a black James Bond, everyone's just like, why not? James Bond is white, but why can't a black man play it? We're not then saying, it's a white person, let's step down. Or when Hamilton came out, Hamilton theatre play, absolutely fantastic. They were played by people of different colours, races, backgrounds, and people like, this is phenomenal. We should be doing more of this. So this conversation of people only playing what they are in their real life, we're going to start getting to, is it going to be life imitating art? Because a lot of actors want to have good roles to play. But I think the problem is that there's a lack of representation in general. Because there's a lack of representation, we have to hold on to certain roles. I'm saying too much. Let me let someone else.
So yeah, Sophie, I'm just going to jump in there because I kind of agreed and disagreed with what you were saying. I think I sit more on the side of the fence with Luanda on this a little bit, just because for me, one thing the world is not short of is people. So if there is a particular story that needs to be told by a particular group, you can always find a talented actor in that group. Like so I don't ever think that there's a shortage of people. So I do think if the story calls for a Native American person, go and get a Native American actor. Do you know what I mean? And I know like we shouldn't pigeonhole to be like, okay, only you can tell Native American stories, for example. But for me, I just think it comes with, I don't know, like a level of authenticity to the art. It's not all about making money. It's like you're just wanting to tell a real story, I guess, through a more realer lens. But when it's something, I guess, that's not so much biopic or a bit more fictional, should I say, and it's like, this actor could be like James Bond is a fictional character, even though this whole time everybody's had an attachment to him and everyone's attachment to him is, okay, this is a white man that plays this role. I think with that role, you can have a little bit more flexibility just because the whole narrative of James Bond has nothing to do with his race. Does that make sense? So that's why I said I sit on the fence, because I agree with Luanda that like, there's lots of people, so those people should tell their stories. But at the same time, I don't think an actor should be limited. But what I will say though is, because I know a few of you guys said it, I may be one of the only black people that doesn't like our lighter skinned black people who can pass as white playing roles that are white. And what I'll say by that, like, my biggest problem I've ever had is, for example, with Rashida Jones. I don't know if you guys know her. Rashida Jones in The Office was playing a white Italian woman. So at that point in my life, I never thought that this was a black woman or a mixed woman. Every role I saw her in, she was white.
Rashida Jones, the same actress from Black AF.
Yes. So then when I saw her in Black AF, I was so confused. I was like, what's my girl from The Office doing here? It baffled me. And then when I did the research, I was like, oh my gosh, she's Quincy Jones' daughter. Oh my gosh, she's half black. And I understand, like, she's biracial, so she can flex and that kind of thing. But I just thought it was strange to me. Because I felt like, yes, she could have been on The Office, but what was wrong with her being on The Office and her just being a biracial woman instead of her pretending to be Italian?
It's not her problem, is
She
it?
doesn't write the role.
Exactly.
I know.
Exactly. The role doesn't exist for her.
Why would you agree to be cast as a different race? That's what I'm confused about.
Right, okay, but
It's like multiple reasons, but there's multiple reasons for that. Firstly, it's a paycheck.
Okay, let's not forget, it's a paycheck. And also, if you are a flexible actor, you don't always want to be defined by your race. If you're in a position like Rashida Jones, where she is, passing as a white woman, she can pass as that. If she can kind of convey the nuances of a white person, it's like, oh yeah, this woman's a great actor. So it's not necessarily that she is, I don't think it's a case where she's not proud to be from where she is. I think she's flexible to do.
I don't think it's a problem. I just think it is odd to me. And the reason why I say it's odd to me is because I had a big problem when Angelina Jolie was pretending to be mixed race or black and Chinese. But we could say the same. Well, I don't know what Angelina's.
But it's not okay. So, but the difference is, like I said, what power does Angelina Jolie have in her life versus that biracial woman? What power does Rashida Jones have in her life versus that Italian woman? There's a big difference. And when we talk about the difference between talking about, okay, we want a black James Bond or we want a black Ariel, because you look at these fictional characters and their stories have nothing to do with their race, but it's so rare to find that. Because you're so used to, like we talked about last week, we're so used to white people being people and everyone else is like a black person or a trans person or a gay person, and like white cisgendered heterosexual people just get to exist, and they get to exist in all these different lenses and all these different stories, fictional or non-fictional. You get to have more than what's just attached to you that you didn't agree with just because of your skin or your gender or your sexuality or anything like that. So when we think about those kind of characters, we want black and brown people to play them because they actually have layers. Whereas if you have black characters or if you have characters of LGBT plus and things like that, their stories or their characteristics or their stereotypes all swirl around that same thing. Like when Linda was talking about Cleveland, when you're writing a black man, you're writing in all these other things, all these other jokes, like how he gave them sister box set at the baby shower and stuff like that. Like, you're writing in black jokes for this black character. You're not just writing a character with funny jokes because you see them that way. So that's why it's more interesting to see the flip side. Like, for example, I don't know if any of you guys have seen Sex Education.
No.
Have you seen that show? Really, guys? What? Basically, there's a really great character and he's a black character, and he got the role when obviously originally the role, like, not to say that it was for a white person, but when the race isn't specified, obviously it's always white. And that character gets to have so many layers because they're not thinking we're writing a black man. They just wrote a boy and then a black man ended up playing him. So you actually get to have such like an actual good role with thoughts and feelings and direction that's not related to you just being a black person.
I don't think we're actually saying anything different. Like, if the race is specific to the role, like Anissa said, if they're Native American, that calls for it. There was that whole thing about Julia Roberts being pegged to play Harriet Tubman 25 years ago.
I remember.
I'm not joking. And people just like she was a black person who was letting slaves free, and they were just kind of like,
didn't just say that.
they were saying not that many people.
It was an exec.
That.
Yeah, an exec was like, oh, people won't tell the difference.
Yes,
Exactly.
it came out last year. Did you not remember that?
So
So it's such a big thing.
if it's specific to their race, that's a different thing. But if it's something that is like anybody can do, because I can't speak on every community, but I would probably make a guess
that every gay person, every black person doesn't only ever want to play a gay or a black person. Like, and if you only played roles that were gay, like Andrew Scott, who was in Sherlock, and he's been on stage, he never plays gay roles. Because I'm assuming on some level, you don't want to get typecast as the gay actor. No one wants to be typecast as the black actor or the Hispanic actor. Like trans people, I'm sure they're like, we'll play a trans character, but let me play someone else, because you want to play us. Like, cis people want to play us, but we don't get to play you. And that's where the problem is, because people need to get into positions of power where they can start writing the roles now. If we're always going to wait on what majority cisgender white men are going to write, they are never going to write diversity.
Yeah. It's definitely so important to pay attention to the writing as well, because we've all seen, especially as black women, the times that I have felt most represented by a black woman when I'm watching a show. I'm like, oh my gosh, this show is great. Like, how can I get cast in this kind of show? And then I realized, oh, the black woman who stars in the show, she also created it and wrote the whole script. Okay, great. Next one. Oh, this show is great about this black woman. Oh, this black woman also wrote it. And do you know what I mean? So it's it is frustrating that we can only have like a representation that we enjoy most of the time so far when it comes from us writing it, because I think that should definitely be expanded. But it's a good thing that we're having the conversation in general. The only way that we're going to fix a problem is by acknowledging that it exists in the first place.